In the spring of 2018, a team of FBI agents descended upon a remote stretch of forest in Elk County, Pennsylvania, armed with ground-penetrating radar and a federal court order. They told no one why they were there. They gave no interviews. They simply arrived, began digging, and then vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving behind a single statement that raised more questions than it answered: nothing was found. But the people of Benezette Township knew better. They had spent decades searching those same woods. They had pored over old maps, interviewed the descendants of Civil War soldiers, and followed rumors that had persisted for more than a century. They knew that something had been hidden in those hills. And when the FBI showed up, they began to wonder if the government had finally found it. The story that unfolded in those Pennsylvania woods is not just about gold. It is about what happens when desperate men hide secrets in the earth, when governments chase whispers, and when a community becomes obsessed with a mystery that may never be solved. The history of American treasure hunting is filled with stories of lost mines and buried payrolls, but few have captured the imagination quite like the legend of Dent's Run. The story begins not with gold, but with a war that tore the nation apart. In 1863, the Confederate Army was in retreat. After the devastating losses at Gettysburg, General Robert E. Lee's forces were limping back to Virginia, pursued by Union troops. But somewhere in the chaos of that retreat, according to the legend, a shipment of gold disappeared. The official story, as it appears in scattered military records and local histories, is that the gold was intended to pay Union soldiers. But the unofficial story is far more intriguing. Some versions claim the gold was Confederate, smuggled north through the mountains to buy supplies. Others say it was a massive treasury shipment that fell into the hands of desperate men who decided to hide it rather than lose it to the enemy. What we know for certain is that in the decades following the Civil War, stories began to circulate in Elk County about a hidden cache of gold bars, somewhere in the dense forests around a small creek called Dent's Run. The gold was said to weigh several tons. Its value, in today's money, would be in the tens of millions. For years, the story was nothing more than local folklore, the kind of tale that old-timers tell around fireplaces on winter nights. But then, in the 1970s, a local man named Warren Getz began to dig. Warren Getz was a colorful character, the kind of man who seemed to have walked straight out of a frontier novel. He was a treasure hunter, a dreamer, and a man who had spent his entire life believing that there was something extraordinary hidden in the hills of his childhood. His obsession began when he met an elderly man named Dennis Parada, who had heard the story from his father, who had heard it from his father before him. The legend had been passed down through generations, growing more detailed with each telling. According to the story, a Union cavalry unit had been transporting gold through the mountains when they were ambushed. The survivors, fearing the gold would fall into Confederate hands, buried it in a cave near Dent's Run. They marked the spot with a distinctive rock formation and then, one by one, died without ever returning to retrieve it. Getz and Parada began searching the area in the 1970s. They used metal detectors, studied old maps, and interviewed anyone who might have information. For years, they found nothing but rusty nails and old horseshoes. But they refused to give up. Then, in 2018, they made a discovery that changed everything. Using advanced ground-penetrating radar, they detected a massive anomaly beneath the surface of a hillside near Dent's Run. The reading suggested that there was something large and metallic buried about 6 feet underground. It could have been a natural formation. It could have been an old boiler or a piece of mining equipment. But Getz and Parada were convinced they had found the gold. When the federal government learned of the discovery, they moved quickly. In February 2018, the FBI obtained a court order to excavate the site. They told the public very little about what they were looking for or why they believed it was there. The operation was conducted in secrecy, with agents cordoning off the area and refusing to answer questions from the curious locals who gathered to watch. The excavation lasted several days. The FBI brought in heavy equipment, dug a deep trench, and carefully examined the contents. When they were finished, they filled in the hole and left without a word. Their only public statement, issued weeks later, was that they had found nothing. But the people of Benezette Township were not convinced. They had watched the agents dig. They had seen the equipment they used. And they had noticed something odd. The FBI seemed to be showing up exactly where Getz and Parada had pointed them. Nothing was found, the FBI said. But the locals wondered, if nothing was found, why had the federal government gone to such lengths to hide what they were doing? The FBI's involvement in Dent's Run raised more questions than it answered. Why would the federal government spend time and resources excavating a remote site based on the claims of a local treasure hunter? The answer, some believed, lay in the secret history of the Civil War. During the war, both the Union and Confederate governments faced enormous financial challenges. The Union had vast resources, but the cost of the war was staggering. The Confederacy, by contrast, was perpetually short of money. They printed massive amounts of paper currency that quickly became worthless. They imposed taxes on everything from tobacco to slaves. But their greatest hope lay in securing loans from European bankers, who were willing to lend money backed by Southern cotton. There were also rumors that the Confederacy had hidden massive amounts of gold and silver in anticipation of a Confederate victory. If the South had won the war, they would have needed a treasury to rebuild their government. But they lost, and many of those caches were never recovered. Some historians believe that the gold at Dent's Run may have been part of a much larger conspiracy, a secret fund that was meant to finance a continuing Confederate resistance after the war. The gold was hidden, but the agents who buried it died before they could retrieve it. And as the years passed, the location was forgotten. The FBI, according to conspiracy theorists, may have been searching for this gold not to return it to the government, but to use it for their own purposes. Some even claimed that the FBI knew exactly where the gold was and had been waiting for the right moment to recover it. Part 5, The Evidence. Despite the FBI's denial, there was compelling evidence that something significant had been buried at Dent's Run. Getz and Parada had collected photographs, maps, and testimony that seemed to support their claims. They had found old military artifacts in the area. They had spoken to people whose ancestors had been involved in the gold's burial. And they had the ground-penetrating radar readings that showed a metallic anomaly buried 6 feet underground. In the months following the FBI's excavation, Getz and Parada began to suspect that the government had not been entirely truthful about what they had found. They pointed to the fact that the FBI had obtained a court order without first conducting a preliminary investigation. This was unusual, they argued, for a case that was supposed to be nothing more than a wild goose chase. They also pointed to the timing of the excavation. The FBI had conducted their dig in February, when the ground was frozen and the weather was harsh. It seemed like a strange time to investigate a site that had been searched for decades. Unless, of course, they were trying to avoid detection. The story of Dent's Run is not just about gold. It is about the people who dedicated their lives to finding it. Warren Getz and Dennis Parada were not just treasure hunters, they were men who believed that the past was not dead, that the secrets of the Civil War were still waiting to be discovered. Getz, in particular, was a man of contradictions. He was a lover of history who spent his life studying the details of the Civil War. He was a businessman who had made and lost fortunes in various ventures. And he was a dreamer, a man who believed that there was something extraordinary waiting to be found beneath the surface of the earth. For years, Getz and Parada had been dismissed as crackpots by the historical establishment. The official narrative of the Civil War did not include hidden gold caches in Pennsylvania. But as the evidence mounted, their story became harder to dismiss. And when the FBI arrived, even the skeptics began to wonder if they had been right all along. In the years following the FBI excavation, the mystery of Dent's Run only deepened. New information emerged that seemed to corroborate some of Getz and Parada's claims. Historical records were discovered that mentioned a shipment of gold that had gone missing during the Civil War. Maps were found that showed a route through Elk County that matched the path described in the legend. But the most tantalizing discovery came from an unexpected source, a man named Tom Bender, a local historian who had been studying the area for decades. Bender had found a reference to a government cache in the archives of a nearby historical society. The document dated back to the Reconstruction era and mentioned a secret mission to recover gold from the mountains of Pennsylvania. The FBI, of course, denied everything. They continued to insist that they had found nothing at Dents Run. But the investigation had been conducted so secretly that there were no official records of what they had actually done. And the court order that had allowed them to excavate the site was still sealed, making it impossible to determine what they had been looking for. As the years passed, the relationship between Getz and Parada began to sour. They had been friends and partners for decades, but the FBI excavation had brought new pressures to bear on their partnership. They disagreed about how to proceed. They argued about who deserved credit for the discovery. And they began to suspect that one of them might have been working with the government. Getz, in particular, became increasingly suspicious. He believed that the FBI had obtained information from Parada, who had been eager to share details of their search with anyone who would listen. He accused Parada of being a snitch and cut off all contact with him. Parada, for his part, insisted that he had done nothing wrong. He had simply wanted to see the site excavated and had believed that working with the FBI was the best way to make that happen. But Getz was convinced that Parada had betrayed him. The betrayal was not just personal, it was a blow to the entire hunt. Without Getz's expertise and Parada's knowledge, the search for the gold fell apart. They had been one of the most successful teams in the history of American treasure hunting, and now they were no longer working together. What did the FBI find at Dents Run? It is possible that they found nothing, just as they claimed. The ground-penetrating radar readings that had excited Getz and Parada may have been caused by natural features or by a deposit of mineralized rock. But it is also possible that they found something and chose to keep it quiet. The U.S. government has a long history of covering up the recovery of valuable artifacts, especially when they are of historical significance. And the gold, if it existed, would be of great historical value. The truth, of course, may never be known. The FBI's court order is still sealed. The agency refuses to comment on the excavation or to release any information about what they found. And Getz and Parada, the two men who came closest to solving the mystery, are no longer speaking to each other. Part 10, The Haunting. The mystery of Dents Run is more than just a story about lost treasure. It is a story about obsession, about how the past can consume the present. It is a story about the human desire for answers and the ways that we can be led astray by our own conviction. Warren Getz died in 2020, never having recovered the gold that he had searched for his entire life. He died believing that the FBI had found something and that they had covered it up. He died believing that he had been right all along. Dennis Parada continues to search, determined to find the treasure that has consumed his life. He still believes that the gold is out there, waiting to be discovered. And the forest of Elk County, Pennsylvania, remains the same as it has for centuries. The trees still stand. The creek still flows. And the truth about what happened at Dents Run remains buried in the earth. At the heart of the Dents Run mystery is a question that can never be answered. What did the FBI find? Was the excavation a carefully planned operation to recover a lost treasure, or was it a wild goose chase that wasted millions of dollars? Did the government cover up the discovery of a priceless piece of American history, or did they simply give up on a fool's errand? There are theories, of course. Some believe that the FBI found the gold and took it, adding it to a secret government fund that has been used for covert operations for decades. Others believe that the FBI found nothing and that the entire excavation was a publicity stunt designed to distract from other, more sensitive operations. But the most haunting possibility is that the FBI found the gold and then realized that they had stumbled onto something far more important than they had expected. The documents that Tom Bender found in the archives of the Historical Society were not just about gold. They hinted at a far more complex operation, one that involved secret government missions and hidden agendas. The Civil War was a time of deception and intrigue, and the gold at Dents Run may have been part of a much larger conspiracy. In the end, the mystery of Dents Run remains unsolved. The gold, if it existed, is still lost. The people who searched for it are gone. And the forest that hid it has kept its secrets. But the story continues to haunt the people of Benezette Township. They remember the day when the FBI showed up, the day when the government descended upon their quiet town and began digging for something that may or may not have been there. They remember the silence that followed, the absence of answers, the feeling that there was something they were not being told. And they still wonder, what did the FBI find? Was it gold? Was it something else? Or was it nothing at all? The answer, like the treasure itself, remains hidden beneath the earth of Elk County, Pennsylvania, waiting for the day when someone will finally uncover the truth. But perhaps that day will never come. Perhaps the forest will keep its secrets forever. And perhaps that is the most haunting possibility of all.